Hello, my name is Dr. Angela Finn. I'm a senior lecturer in fashion design at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. And my presentation for the symposium today is entitled Working in Isolation, Making It Happen. And in the presentation, I'll be sharing some reflections on design for empowerment through making by sharing a research and personal project that I've been working for some time. I would like to just mention that I'm sorry I can't be with you live. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and the time differences are difficult to work with. I'm not very experienced at making online presentations, so I apologise in advance for any stumbling that might happen, and I hope that I can share some thoughts with you. The way I've set up the PowerPoint is to act as a connecting file. So there'll be a recording of me going through the presentation, but then also parts of the presentation slides that you can refer to later to connect with different parts. I decided to do a quick shout out for this image, Alone Together. It's one of the standouts from my students in 2020. The student is Xinyu Zhang, who is in our Bachelor of Fashion Design at RMIT, a third year student. Okay, Sisterly. So I'd like to introduce firstly the topic of the day, which is a sustainable fashion brand that I've been developing for quite a few years now with my real life sister, Amelia Axford. The purpose of the brand is to really look at how we can make fashion in a different way and what opportunities the digital platform that we've developed might offer to connect makers with people who want fashion made as a different way of manufacturing. So it's a range of women's apparel designed to have longevity, really, be honestly and ethically produced, and to also give people a hand up in terms of, design that is actually produced to allow people to learn skills as they go. So I'll connect you with the website so that you can go and check out the sort of work we've put together, but I've included a few pages here just so you get the idea. Sisterly really has quite a few interpretations and a long history of thinking and talking about what might be possible to create a sustainable design and manufacturing system within Australia, but more importantly, a local system, so one that is not reliant on distance as a key discriminating factor against people who would like to be a part of our industry within design. So when we started out really thinking about what we'd like to do and what we could contribute to fashion in Australia, one of the key focuses for developing this platform was to connect makers. So look at sustainability through the lens of offering opportunities for people, offering work that is sustainable and worthwhile, and that improves our community. So we'd really love at the moment to just get as many people as possible involved in Sisterly. And I think the more people that we can connect with, the better chances we have of having a system that's ready when the market aligns with the need for that system. So 2020 with COVID-19 in Melbourne, we've been in lockdown and working from home and pretty much trapped in the house, if that's a good way to put it, since March 16th this year. And as I'm making this presentation, it is still lockdown. We are in slightly relaxed conditions, but for the bulk of that, the last 3 months, we've actually been we really have not been permitted to leave the house unless it's for emergency supplies or required exercise. And when we do leave the house, of course, it's been very challenging. We've been wearing masks, which is great. Everybody's doing that and trying to protect others. But I think in terms of being difficult, and this is something that is now facing you guys there, it is really difficult to just be at home all the time. Now, if we translate that to what it feels like for people who don't have opportunities and don't have jobs and social interactions, this loneliness and feeling of isolation is definitely becoming one of the critical questions of our generation, I think. And I think Sisterly partly is about that. We imagine people in Australia in remote areas, maybe it's people who live on a property. And some properties in Australia are literally hundreds of kilometres from the nearest town or post office or, whatever we designate to be an urban centre is even further off than that. So Sisterly was really set up to work within those limitations. So the idea of how Sisterly works is through Australia Post, because Australia Post does deliver everywhere in Australia. And it was very important to us that it was kept achievable and simple, leveraging existing systems through digital platforms such as Sisterly. So how it works, basically we we started out designing collections and we ended up actually working towards designing one sustainable and achievable dress that has a lot of different that has had a lot of different input and collaborative design with makers over the last few years, and it's perfect to prove a system, which is ideally what we were setting out to do. Okay, so this is another example of the website, but I do encourage people to take a look at it. That's actually a bit of me sewing. So the other important thing about Sisterly was that you didn't actually need to sew or be a maker to want to be a maker either. And I think that's very important discussion for this symposium, in that if you do, the digital environment, the kind of technology that we have access to, and pretty much in the Western world, definitely most people do have access to some form of technology. Technology is a great way to connect, and we know that obviously through Facebook and Instagram and things like that. But I do think that it's also an amazing way to learn skills. So it's the days of perhaps having to formally train to do simple sewing tasks, which is what Sisterly is about, are behind us. You can learn how to do basic things on YouTube. Platforms like Sisterly can be connected with video tutorials to help people actually produce the items. So of course we use Facebook and connect with people. We've got a very clear, transparent model. Basically, a person buys what we call a pack, and that is sent out to them. They sew it and they sell it back. So they buy it at a low price, they sell it back at double that price, and the difference is their wages that they can earn making the product. And I just talked through that, but there's a slide explaining the system. So there's some examples of the early packs that we did. The original Shift pack was in a linen fabric. It was woven. It was straight sewing, but we found it was still quite difficult for people to make. There were some parts of it that were, required a bit of industry knowledge. So that's how we came up with the A-line sheath pack, which was the merino stretch dress, and that seemed to work a lot better. Here's a quick time lapse of the dress being sewn, just to show that it is possible to make this dress fairly easily. This was in my studio, and I'll just play the time lapse. So as you can see, the machine here is just a very low cost machine. It's actually the cheapest Singer sewing machine I could find on the market that would do the twin needle stitch needed for the jersey fabric. So the machine cost $100 Australian, which I think is around 45 pounds. So nothing flash. So here is a picture of me and my sister. I'm on the left with our amazing little Singer sewing machine there, and Millie's on the right. So I'll link you up to this article as well. So I just want to get back to the topic a little bit around how design and making can be used, to really provide a platform for people to get a foot up. So we've called our system bootstrapping, and the story of Clones Lace was one that really inspired us. So I've put a link here to this story. It's about how a group of women designed this particular lace and started producing it in Ireland during the famine in the 1800s, and it's a great empowering story. And you think if people can do that kind of thing at a time when there was really, a letter took weeks to go between Ireland and London, for example, what could be the possibilities that you might have now? So I've also put together some personal reflections on design and Sisterly, and a bit more information in case people are interested in watching, well, not what, I mean, watching and hearing me talk a bit more about those topics, but it's just embedded, so it's quite easy if you do want to hear a bit more about the project. So just a couple of key points, because I realise this is quite difficult to make a presentation when I'm in Melbourne and it's in lockdown, and it's actually really late at night when I'm making this presentation too, so I hope that's okay with everybody. The key points I think to take away are that the traditions and history of opportunities empowerment for women are rooted in cottage industry and developed through textiles and clothing. Work in textiles and clothing has been a viable way for communities to rebuild and survive throughout history, or particularly through her story, as we say. Women's work is a whole area of research, and it has a lot to teach us and a lot of inspiration for how we can move forward in the 21st century as much as in the past. Skills for making are transferable. And traditionally, they're passed on through a master and apprentice model. Although women were not officially recognised through the apprenticeship system, I think it's really important to understand that these skills, this transfer of skills, thanks to the digital platforms and the digital world that we live in now, especially post-COVID, there is so much to be gained from just watching tutorials, and sourcing anything you would like to know is available through those platforms such as YouTube. But I guess it's also important to remember that the craft guilds, particularly lace making, embroidering guilds, have actually survived to this day and provide an important social function. But an interesting question to think about in terms of empowering women, particularly through digital platforms, is could we revisit those, and could they be reorganised more as industrial organisations using these platforms and new platforms such as Sisterly that are specifically designed to engage with women who want to be creative and making and working from their own home? The opportunities of tacit knowledge transfer are being realised through YouTube and other free tutorials and activities that build skills through practice. So it's just a point here that it's great to watch things and think about making things, but the real key to learning through doing is learning through the doing. So refining the skills and the abilities through the practice. The role of the university, I think, is to translate research and research methods for practitioners. So that's something that I think in more recent years, particularly with initiatives like this, we're getting a lot better at doing that. I think online selling communities and opportunities for micro business, such, brings us into this zone of making alone but together. So examples include Etsy, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. These these platforms, however, they're really large scale and they target maximum audiences. But new and emerging digital spaces also have enormous opportunity for localized commerce and communities. And Facebook Marketplace is an emerging example and one that I think it's worthwhile to keep an eye on. I think COVID here in Melbourne, particularly, not necessarily in other parts of Australia, but particularly in Melbourne, it has been such an interesting time because we've really had to start thinking about everything we buy, everything we use, where does it come from? So you would have seen, I'm sure, on the news that we had, massive shortages of toilet paper was the number one thing everyone wanted to buy. So there were three items that were really well, actually there was four, but there were three grocery items that was what we were laughing about as being super hoarded. And these were toilet paper, yeast, and plain flour. So it's very interesting to think about, what do we consider the absolute necessities of life? In Australia, I had to laugh because the fourth hoarded item here was alcohol, and I think that is also very telling. So um, I think I was talking to a friend in the UK who was saying, that people were buying, two bottles of wine or extra beers and things when the first wave of COVID happened. And I remember laughing because in Melbourne, it was literally people trying to buy cases of champagne and cases of, red wine to get them through the couple of weeks of intense lockdown. So at times like this, internet shopping, for example, became a weekly reality for most people. It is a very safe way to shop. Um, Basically, you order online and you drive through a pickup drive-through. I don't know what else to call it, but you pull up and they bring your groceries out and you basically put your groceries in your car and take them away. So that's been really interesting. Despite all the hard challenges, there have been some interesting parts as well that I think will change things perhaps for a very long time here. So we'll see what happens. So as a part of the Pontoon Festival, we've also set a bit of homework. So we'll put up some links for some basic hand stitching videos and how to make a COVID-19 mask. So if you haven't ever made anything and it's something that you're interested in learning about, hopefully you will give it a go and make a mask for you or for someone in your family who maybe can't make their own mask. There's been a lot of fun masks around, great prints. There was also actually a rush on quilting fabric, so fat quarter packs, that kind of thing, for people making masks. So it's good. The quilting community definitely is an example of one that is always interested in using their skills and talents to support their community. And the second two modules will be around just how to use a domestic sewing machine and how to sew stretch fabric on a domestic sewing machine. And the links for those have been provided by Dr. Jo Kramer, who's my colleague at RMIT and who developed some of this content herself and is kindly sharing it for the symposium. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing from people and hearing different ideas. I really thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this important initiative. And I've put the link to Sispli here. If there's any comments or questions, please feel free to contact me. And all the best. Thank you very much.